What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? We jumped straight to the video instead of going to the countdown, so we changed it up a bit. But we're glad you guys that we're back. We're glad to be back here. I'm glad to have Gabe back. As you all know, we all are pastors, and the weeks can get crazy, and life can get really busy. So, yeah. Gabe, how you been, man?
I've been good, man. Just trying to stay sane, trying to keep it together.
I feel you, bro. I feel you with that, man. Yeah. That's tough. There's a lot there's so much, man, with everything going on, and then with churches and reopening and all that. So, yeah, it's a lot. So today, September 11. Oh man, crazy. What was it, 2001, right? Do you remember where you were back?
I remember it like it was yesterday, bro. Vividly.
Where were you at in New Jersey already?
Yeah, I was in Jersey. I was on my way to school, actually. And I'll just, make it brief. There's this exit in New Jersey. It's, commonly called the last exit in New Jersey. It gets off right near the bridge. There's a bridge that's called Outer Bridge Crossing that goes into Staten Island, which is a borough of New York City. So typically at that point, which is pretty elevated, you could see the New York City skyline and, all the buildings, the Empire State. As kids, we would, get so excited when we'd get to that point of, our trip to school, and we would shout it out like which buildings we could see.
Wow.
That particular morning, though it was, sunshine in Jersey, it was oddly cloudy in New York City where we couldn't see any of the buildings.
Wow. That was before everything.
Little did we know, once we got to the school, we found out that it wasn't clouds at all. Yeah.
Oh my. Yeah.
So yeah, man. Once we got to the school, there were police already there. I think we had like a half day after that. Kids started getting called home. Their parents went to pick them up, and I just remember my third grade teacher turned the TV on. I don't know why. She broke all protocol, and she, yelled to one of the other teachers. The second building came down.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So vividly, bro.
Man, that's crazy because you were there. Obviously, you could definitely like physically see it, visually and whatnot. I guess not the font, but like you're saying, proximity wise, were you guys scared at all? Like, I'm sure like everyone was scared, but you being so close in proximity to where everything was happening that day.
We were pretty scared. On the East Coast part of New Jersey, certain communities, especially like the ones across the river from New York, there's a lot of like refineries and factories, like that hold gas and everything. We were afraid for months, bro, that like, there could be another attack and they might hit this spot or that spot.
Right.
And so like we had a police officer at our school every day for months after that.
Wow.
Which before that, it's an elementary school. You don't need a police officer or a security guard or anything like that. So yeah, we were pretty scared. I definitely the day of, and then the months leading after.
Wow, dude. Yeah, that's crazy, man. I'm trying to think of. I don't even know what grade I was in. I was elementary for sure. Probably like 5th grade, 4th grade.
I was in 3rd grade. So
3rd grade. What grade? Yeah. What year did you graduate high school?
2011.
Okay, so we were the same. So you were in what, 3rd grade?
Yeah, I was in 3rd grade.
Wow. Yeah. 3rd grade, man. I remember. Yeah, we were. I briefly remember we were called to the chapel because I was at an academy, and everyone was there, and then there was people crying. As a 3rd grader, I was like,
yeah.
And so some of the teachers were like shook, and some of the older students in high school were crying and stuff, and I was like, what is going on? I don't think I got it. I don't think I understood, because I remember, like you were saying, my mom came, picked me up, and I was going home, and I remember she had the TV on at home, and I think she was talking to someone, and she's just like, oh my God, just pan. And I was the first time it really hit. I was like, man, if my mom's freaking out, then maybe it's something I should be freaking out about too. That's a surreal day. It's a surreal day. A lot. I mean, our hearts go out to all those that lost loved ones that day. We've heard so many stories of not just people. I mean, unfortunately, the people that were trapped in the buildings that couldn't get out on time, and especially also the first responders that rushed into a burning and falling building,
right,
risking their lives, right? So we want to just honor and remember them. And what a crazy time. I know a lot of people thought the world was ending there, right? And now we're in 2020, September 11, 2020.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought that here we are in the middle of a virus thinking the same thing of, is this the end? Yeah, man, that's crazy. So to all those, September 11, man, what a crazy turning point, I think, for a lot of our lives, right? That was, I think, for millennials, that was our big day, our big, where were you? Obviously from then, I think we've had a lot, I think Kobe's death is another one. Maybe the start of quarantine is another one.
Yeah.
For many, election day as well is another one that we've had in the 2000s. But yeah, crazy time. But
funny how we don't need to know, like, we don't need to mention like the year. We already know which election we're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. So Gabe, so what are you eating, man? You eating anything?
No, I drinking a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a banana like maybe 45 minutes ago. But yeah,
good move. So I just got my water in my, was it hydro flask? I think they're called. I don't know. And we're probably gonna have brunch with my parents that are in town. So
okay, nice.
That'll be my food. So I'm not eating right now, but we'll be feasting on the Word of God, right? But we are going into James 3. We've been talking about James 1 and 2 over the last couple of weeks, and just seeing the balance between James and Paul in the book of Romans and how they both complement each other. We had just talked about in James 1 of just being persevering through tribulations and temptations, and how temptations don't come from God. It is many times from our own doing. And then we spent a good amount of time in that first chapter of just, it's better to listen and then rather than to speak and get angry. And we are also called to be doers, not just just watchers or what is going on around us. Then we talked about chapter 2, showing favoritism and partiality, that's not part of the kingdom of God, right? We are all just brothers and sisters. We're all one in the kingdom of God. There should be no favoritism and partiality, regardless of if it's a wealth or economic status, a race issue or whatever. And then also the paradox of or I don't know if the paradox is a good word, but the paradigm of faith and deeds, right? What's the balance between you working and showing your faith through your works? James says, hey, yeah, Marlon. Yeah. Catch up on James 1 and 2. This should be on Facebook as well, but check it out. But yeah, talking about that balance between faith and works, James is saying, hey, you can't really have faith without really showing it and living it out. And I think James will continue that here in James 3. So we're just going to just jump into it. James chapter 3, verses, I guess, 1 to 12 we'll go into, or maybe we'll break it out into we'll go 1 through 12 for the time being, because it talks about the tongue for a while. But James 3, 1 to 12 says, not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. And anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouth of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal, or take large ships as an example. Although they're so large and big and are driven by strong winds, they're steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Are out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. So James going in here and really hitting on, I guess, the hypocrisy of many of the believers that, you know, even currently today, right? How we don't act, we're not consistent in all of our lifestyle and all of our doing and our living with what we preach and believe, right? So starting, I guess, in the first couple of verses there, kind of this, he's kind of holding teachers accountable, right? Be careful what you teach, because you have the privilege and the opportunity to really persuade or move people one way or another. And we just got to be mindful that we have that great responsibility, right? I think as pastors, it's kind of scary too, to think about, like, you can say something and really make, convince people.
Yes.
And we've seen that, and obviously in extreme instances, right? With what's the preacher in Jamestown, that made all his congregants drink Kool-Aid that was poison. You've seen different people like that. We see it today too. Many people that follow, in a sense, blindly, but they just have their trust on a leader or a teacher. What a big responsibility, right? That is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's interesting, James, like his style of writing, I guess, especially like the content. This seems more like it's a portion from the Old Testament, like from the book of Proverbs or Psalms,
right?
Anything from like the wisdom.
That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think the point he's driving here is kind of like what he was talking about in James chapter 2 and James chapter 1, how there is this balance between faith and the things that we do, right? Good works.
Right.
And so how the tongue often is, though it's the smallest member in your body, right? It often negates everything else that we're doing. Like we could, proclaim that we worship God and that we are servants of him, but at the same exact time, use our tongue for malice and for speaking hate and speaking curses. And I think that I'm not sure what's going on with the early church. Is like, needing to address this. Really but it seems like perhaps there was gossip. Perhaps there was a lot of, going back and forth with just, saying bad things to each other.
Right.
And just that verse number 5, even so the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles.
Wow.
I just imagine, I don't know why right now I imagine the fires burning in California.
That's exactly my imagery too. Yeah.
Of Oregon, and how something little can have such a ripple effect. And that's often what happens when we, misspeak, whether we do it intentionally or not. As you mentioned, if you're a pastor and, you say something that's wrong, unfortunately, because of the platform that you have, people are going to believe you. People are going to, take your word on it. And we've seen recently in the news just this week how important it is, the things that you say and the things that you don't say with your tongue, and how it can have a life or death effect on people.
Literally. So, yeah. That's good. Yeah. Just the power of the tongue, right? I like the imagery there. You can definitely, I worked with horses for a couple summers in summer camp, and huge animals, beautiful creatures, right? And just Yeah, I was in Texas, bro. So you got to at some point.
Oh, that's true.
At some point, you got to work with horses in Texas.
Yeah.
No, it was just, yeah. Long story short, ended up there and got placed there when I applied. Not apply. I got in trouble my first year working at summer camp, so I was sent to the barn, and they liked my work ethic, so I went back the second time. But it was fun. It was amazing to see these huge creatures. I'm afraid to ride them because I fell off a couple times, and it's just But just to see how you can control them, as he's saying here, just by the bit that you put in their mouth, right? You can move them left and right, and not just that, they just learn to trust you, right? And they follow you. And there's this huge animal that can trample you at any moment, that will just literally walk behind you if trained to do so, right? And then the same way in the ship, right? You can move a huge, large ship with a small rudder, a very small rudder, wherever the pilot wants to go. And so it's crazy that James is making, like you were saying, right? Really great point. I wonder what was happening in the church. We saw earlier that there was this idea already that the church was honoring or favoring those that were rich, right? Those were able to finance the church in some way, and the poor people, they're like, no, you just sit on the ground because you're not really bringing anything to the church.
Yeah,
James like, yo, you can't do that. That's not that. You're still operating with the world's idea. And here it may seem that people were maybe saying, hey, I have faith, as he was talking in chapter 2, but what they were doing or what they were speaking, right? Before he talks about what you're doing doesn't show that you have faith, but now he's saying what you're speaking negates the very faith that you claim that you believe in, right? And so it's powerful here, like you're saying, right? We see those fires. Some of the pictures I know, San Francisco, of the pitch, it looks like a end of the world movie, right? Something from like I Am Legend with Will Smith, right? Of like pitch, just orange, and yeah, it's just crazy. But how, like we saw, I think one of the fires in California started with a gender reveal, right? So it can be just a small spark, and before you know it, it's just consumed, and it's just crazy how it continues, right? Verse 7 is very funny. All kinds of animals, right? You think about monkeys, burros, cows, cattle, dogs, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures. They've all been, Shamu, think about all of SeaWorld. Yeah. They've been tamed and are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. Like, there is no possibility to tame the tongue.
Yeah.
It's a restless evil full of deadly poison.
Yeah.
Ah, man.
Just pointing back to that verse that mentions fire.
Right.
And let's see. Set on fire by hell, right? Mm-hmm. The typical, like in Greek, I don't know, my study Bible says the typical word is Hades, right, in Greek. Mm-hmm. But that's not what James is referencing to. He's referencing Gehenna, which was a garbage dump outside
that's good.
The city of Jerusalem. And much like what they do in practice in some countries today, and even some portions of our country where they burn the garbage, the Israelites would go outside of Jerusalem and burn their garbage. And so that's the fire that James is referring to.
That's good. That's good.
The fire that comes from a garbage dump. And if you could imagine, the smell is hard. It's not a good smell. And I guess that's what happens when you are taken away with gossip, taken away with speaking falsehoods, whether intentional or unintentionally. That's what it smells like.
Right. Your word is trash, pretty much.
Yeah.
Your word is legit trash. No, that's a great context there. Because it's interesting. He hasn't really like. I guess we'll talk a little as we go on right here. What he's meaning when you're using your tongue, like because he hasn't really said when you're doing gossip, this is how you're using tongue. He'll say a little bit later, but yeah, it's very interesting how we really can't. He makes it seem like you really can't control that tongue as we do with other creatures or animals or things in this world. And how that tongue can lead us to ruin, right? How I think we've seen it today, and I'm thinking today maybe tongue in the sense of just speaking verbally now can even translate to what we do is on social media, our thoughts as well, right? We talked a little bit about cancel culture too, right? And I know we all have different we might be in different spectrums of how we feel about it, right? But how a lot of people have been canceled because of what they said on social media, right? And so how that can be your own demise. And I think rightfully so, there are instances where people have been either vile or evil, racist, you fill in the blanks, where rightfully so, they've paid the consequences by one, maybe losing their livelihood and their job, or their reputation taking a hit. And so, yeah, it's very, very interesting how you can feel like you're living a good life, but what you say, especially now, not just verbally, but what you're typing and what you're writing, can really come back to haunt you, and you may end up in the trash at some point. No, but
yeah. And what's interesting is that James is, when he's talking about like, the fire that comes from this, garbage dump, what he's saying isn't that that's like your final destination. Yes. Right. If we think about like apocalyptically, like when evil is completely done away with, there's a fire that consumes. But interestingly enough, he's saying that their tongues, the fire is lit from that place. So like quite literally what you were saying is, what's coming out is garbage,
Yeah.
What we're spewing, what we're, whether if we're teaching or we're, tweeting, it's garbage.
Yeah. No, it really makes you think about, because I feel like there's so much. I mean, he kind of made this point too in chapter 2, where he said, I can show someone. He says, I talked to someone. He says, you have faith, I have deeds, and he says, show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deed. Right. So people are saying like, I have faith, but my deeds may speak differently. Right. That's what he's saying. Like, you can't do that. And I think we're seeing that a lot now as we've, and I don't want to just say it's one side. I mean, I think it's in all sides of the political spectrum. And all areas of social media, if you want to say, where people are saying like, hey, I'm a Christian, and so I'm kind of excused when I say these bad things. And it's like, no, you have, because you're a Christian, it should lead you, as we were talking in Romans too, by living in the Spirit, to think about others more, right? And we were talking about how that includes voting and how you live your life, and so I think there's a lot of people too, not just to do in what they do and how they operate in this world, but also in how they communicate, where they're like, they'll always fall back and like, I'm a Christian, I have faith. But I hate Mexicans because they're all rapists and drug dealers, right? It's like, how do you?
Right.
I mean, the same way too. You can go, the side. I'm a Christian, but you can plug in whatever the hot topics are, and I'm against black people getting equal opportunity for jobs and schooling and stuff. And so by our words, James is saying you are disqualifying the very thing you think you say you claim and believe in. That's crazy.
I like that. And much like Jesus, James is urging the brethren to examine the fruits that Christians or so-called Christians bear. And I think that is an important aspect of being wise, of course, being a daughter and a son of the Most High, because although, and I hear it all the time from Christians, we always quote, don't judge me, that's one of the famous verses that are used out of context. Although like the judgment in connection to condemnation and final like destination, that is reserved to God. We as Christians are called to make judgment calls about whether or not, I'm being faithful to God, or perhaps somebody else is being faithful to God, and they need to be held accountable to it.
Right.
And so James, I love how he talks about this whole entire theme in verse 12. It says, can a fig tree bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs?
Right.
He's urging the church, look, examine the fruits of others. Examine the fruits that you give, that you're bearing. See if it's matching. And the idea, like you said, many Christians or so-called Christians that say all these things that just absolutely divide people. They're offensive, fill in the blank, racist, xenophobic, misogynistic, whatever.
Mhm.
Can that come from God? Does that come from God? And the answer is absolutely not. So yeah, we definitely have to be
Mhm.
careful with,
Yeah.
the tongue, man.
Right.
It's so
Right.
easy, and it's so easy. And as James says, like, yo, we use the tongue to bless God, and then we
Uh-oh.
curse man who's been
Mercy.
made in the image of God.
Yo. Yeah. That's the
So
verse right there.
yeah. So like how can we praise God and then somehow delegitimize and undermine the dignity and the imago Dei in somebody
Right.
else?
Right. Dude, that's crazy because you definitely see that in that, just I feel like people disconnect, what Jesus comes and says, the two greatest commandments, love God and love your neighbor, right? Well, people will be like, I can love God without really loving my neighbor, right? And it's like, you really can't, because truly loving God and receiving his love will lead you to loving your neighbor, right? But it's so
Yes.
powerful seeing this just vividly. I can, see conversations on Facebook, Instagram, debates or conversations in real time where people are like so committed to God, right? I'm praising God, but then they can just turn around and curse their brothers and sisters or talk falsely. And it's just like you said, right? It's not just that, but James includes that they're literally made in God's likeness, right? They are literally little gods, if you want to say, right? Because they're made in his image. They're his children. And what are like a rebuke, but also just like it's so. And I think that's what James' point here is, like it doesn't make any sense, right? It's just it's such a it just makes no sense that you can say I have faith, but I don't really act on that faith by loving others, right? He says earlier in chapter 2, you see a person that's cold and doesn't have clothes, and you just say, hey, I'm gonna pray for you. I hope you find warmth and food. And he's like, yo, you do it. And now he's saying you are cursing the very people that have the image of God that you so desire to love and worship.
Yeah.
What a hypocrite. And it's just crazy because he said it's impossible. This is really impossible. It just says that you either are serving God and praising him or you're not, because as he says later on, water and salt water and fresh water do not come out of the same spring, right?
Yeah.
And so if there's evil coming out of you at any point, then you have no good in you.
It's tough, Sebastian. Listen, even even in in cases where I think the individual is clearly wrong, like say I'm having a conversation, a debate about any topic, we can be talking about human rights or Black Lives Matter, and of course there's going to be a variety of opinions on that. It's very easy to quickly go after somebody else's humanity in those conversations.
Yes.
I've seen it happen time and time again where, even from both sides of the argument, where people just like, come at each other, personal attacks, and, they just like violate each other's dignity.
Right.
And look, you could, believe what you want to believe and, have the theological ammunition to back it up. But God tells us that we're all created in his image and we should treat each other that way.
Yes. So
talking to each other like roughly or saying, using your tongue to, undermine somebody else's humanity, that's not saying it how it is. Like that's not just being
I'm just being honest, don't take it personal. It's like, no,
that's not it at all. That we know that it doesn't come from God. So there's only one source that can come from,
Right. Dude, that's powerful. Marlon had mentioned these things before. God says, be perfect like your father is perfect. And it starts with your words. Very true. Like it says in the last part of verse 2 of James 3. And it's not necessarily speaking, I think to like being sinless and perfect in the sense of like, I don't do wrong, but it's more of like this idea of like perfect love for others, maybe, the sense of, when Jesus talks about it, he says about blessing those who hurt, who curse you, doing good to those who harm you, praying for those who persecute you, right? That's how you act as a perfect child of God, right? And it's following in the same spirit and life of Jesus. And then very good as well. I think James was quoting Matthew 7:16, right? With the figs example, right? Well, for sure, where it's like, by your fruits, by their fruits, you will know them. Let me just text Brian, who's texting me real quick. by your fruits you will know them, right? And so I think we fool ourselves so much because maybe our profile may say Seventh-day Adventist or Christian, or right. I don't know how many. I'm sure you've done that too on Twitter. Whenever you see some viral vitriol comment, and then you go to their profile on Twitter, and it says, Bible believing Christian, right? Saved by the grace of God, and they have just spit out this hate and this animosity towards, like James is saying, these are people made in the image of God, and yeah, you may not agree, right, James, and I'm sure there was things, we go back to the Jerusalem Council, there was things that even they may have not seen eye to eye with in how they do ministry and how they reach out to the Gentiles, to the non-Jewish people.
Yeah.
But it says that just because you do not agree on how things maybe should be done or resolved, right? We talk about the political sphere of how policies and how it should all happen. That does not give you the opportunity or the reason to demean or dehumanize people, right? Because it's so easy to lump all and I fall prey to it too, right? When we're talking about just politics, when we're just talking about whatever it is. Welcome, Brian. What's up, Brian? Welcome here. I fall into that pitfall, or that whatever that we call it, where I tend to, you group the people together and you dehumanize them, and you say, no, all of these people you can say are racist and hypocrites and not real. And at the same time, the same thing that I may be saying that others aren't doing by not humanized, I can be doing the same thing to others. So it really a check for myself, right? To realize that even the people I do not agree with, that may be very well wrong, I still have to realize they are also made in God's image, which is tough, right? And to not allow my tongue to do the very thing that I'm blaming them that they're doing, right? But I think it's a powerful, just the imagery here, right? Out of the same mouth comes praise and cursing, right? It reminds me of my dogs. My mom always says, we don't really let Zoe or Xylo lick us that much, but every time they give us a lick, my mom's like, that's the tongue they use to lick their butt, right? And it's kind of that imagery, right? Where it's like, they're licking their butt and then they're also licking you. Like and then you can already tell, right? It's not, the licking you doesn't negate the fact that they touched and they licked their butt that is full of poo and pee, right? The fact that they licked you means that you kind of now maybe have some poo. And so that just shows also in that imagery that even in your praising God, regardless of how you treat others, that praising God is tainted with all this evil, because it's not truly praise because you're not doing well. It's full of that poop, if you want to say, right? Because you're doing evil and bad to others. So powerful section here.
Right. Right. And I just, disclaimer, the verse 8, no man can tame the tongue.
Oh, I had it. Yeah.
No man. So if there's anyone thinking that they are perfect, walking around with this sinlessness with regard to gossip and everything, hey, James says, no man can do it. No human. Just a disclaimer. That's a shout out to last generation theology.
I like that too. Yeah, because it really is just about submitting to Jesus and letting him control your tongue, man. You can't. Yeah. When you want to lash out, that's when you're like, God, help me out, because I'm so. And I think there's time for debate. There's time for, those crucial conversations, but not allowing your tongue to tear down people made in the image of God. Right. I don't know if you have any thoughts here on taming the tongue, or. That thing that's been our kind of our most poignant point there in verse 9. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we also curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. But
yeah, I guess I just go to that that phrase that we tend to bring up often, right? Out of the abundance of the heart, speaks the tongue, right? And I have a hard time with it because we're reading here what James is saying in chapter 3, and it's just difficult because sometimes it's difficult to judge a person's heart, because they're willing to do something and they'll be like, hey, I'm with you, I'm going to support you, we're going to do something together, or Jesus, I love you. Wow. But at the same time, that same tongue is saying outrageous things, and things that don't go with scripture, or don't go with the character of God, and it's difficult to see or to really understand people based on what they speak. Because though they themselves may be wanting to do something, at the end of the day, they say something completely different. And sometimes, we talk a lot about like how actions speak louder than words. And I think that in part what James is saying too is that is that precisely, especially in the first two chapters, he talks a lot about this faith and what it looks like in action, right? And what works means to him versus what it means to Paul and things like that. And so when I see him saying these words many times, if he's saying, your words are great sometimes, but your actions are pitiful. Or other times it's like your actions, what you want to do, what you're doing is great, but then what you're saying doesn't go with these acts of kindness that you're trying to do in your community. And so you can't do acts of kindness and then speak in your church and say like, gays are not going to go to heaven. Like that doesn't go. And so I feel like in a way James is saying your good works are burned by the scripture that you preach.
That's good. That's good.
And so I think that we need to be speaking of acceptance and of the fact that we don't know exactly what is in people's hearts, and we don't know exactly what their struggle is. But we can bear them together, we can go through that together. And I think in part James is getting to that many times our words and our actions are in conflict with each other. And a real understanding of like this authentic worship lifestyle would be to kind of bring those two things together and speak words of truth and also do works of kindness and justice.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks, because it makes it an issue that is directly connected to our spiritual status as humans. We're all fallen, and we're all vile and sinful, and we all live with that tension of being able to bless God and then curse our neighbor at the same exact time. And I think that when we hear these kind of things come out of the mouths of Christians, and even from ourselves at moments where we lash out and we dehumanize somebody, or say just really poor things about a group of people, we get a glimpse of what our heart looks like. We get little pictures, and others are able to see that on display as well with our words. So yeah, man, powerful stuff.
Yeah.
No,
I love it.
I want to bring out, because we're actually studying Genesis at our local church, and going through the creation story where God speaks things into existence, and then he gives like that dominion to Adam, and he names things, right? With his words, he's naming things, and animals and whatnot. And when you think about like these power of words and the abundance of the heart, right? And what we're talking about right now, you think about what the first thing that comes out of Adam's mouth, right? After the fall, right? After he eats of the fruit. And, one of the first things is like, okay, hey, I was afraid, I hid and I was afraid. Right. But then the second thing was blame. And so the first thing was like, I acknowledge like, yo, like I'm scared. Right. But then the second thing was like, yo, no, it was your fault. But then the third thing that he says later on was he names the woman, he names her Eve. And by so doing, I was reading different commentators and stuff like that on it. He's basically acknowledging that the promise that God gave them is saying like, hey, be fruitful, multiply, and from that seed from this seed, Jesus would come. By him saying, "Hey, now your name is the mother of like nations," basically. He's holding on to that promise. And so in many aspects of our life, I feel that we speak out of fear, and then we relate to God based on what we think he should have done, right? And because he blames God, hey, the woman you gave me, right? It wasn't like I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for this blessing. Too. Yeah, I didn't ask for this blessing, right?
Right.
And so at many times what comes out of our mouth is based off of fear and trying to find a blame and not trying to take accountability for what we're doing, what our actions are. But then the third thing that can come out of our mouth is this like great promise. That if we really understand scripture, we really understand what Jesus is about and what he did and what he's doing, you really come to this realization that no, there's a greater promise, and it's not about me talking down to my brother or my sister or whoever. It's really about bringing about this communicating this promise that Jesus gives.
That's good.
Right.
That's powerful. Yeah, I'm reminded just in what you're saying too of just Proverbs 18:21 that says the tongue has the power of life and death. And those who love it will eat its fruit, right? And so true, right? Like you're saying, right? Whether that's either meaning life and death for ourselves or just those around us, right? Where before he's speaking, like you were saying, of Eve in a life-like way, and then after that he's condemning her and saying it's her fault, And so how we do that, so we're so quick to do that too, and just how we tear people down, and we think about all those cyber and bullies that happen in middle school or high school, and a lot of people that a lot of kids that commit suicide because they've been bullied, and just the power of your tongue. Like we're saying, you can't control it, you can't tame it, and because the moment you think you have in control, you're gonna lash out on someone. So that really requires us to really be connected to Jesus and the Spirit to lead us in how to communicate. So,
I just to reiterate, I think it's again, it's a manifestation of a deeper issue, which is in the heart.
Yeah.
And I think that if we're going to do the work of taming the tongue, it requires a lot more honesty than just keeping your mouth shut when you're mad.
That's good.
It's not just keeping your mouth shut when you're mad, because you could still curse somebody in your mind. It's really allowing God's Spirit to come and do the work that's sometimes painful, but in your heart. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. So we're going to continue here, James 3:13-18, the last section here. Great portion on the tongue. You can really talk a lot about it. But he continues, who is wise and understanding among you? Well, let them show it by their good life and deeds. Again, that's how you show your faith, or how you have wisdom and understanding, done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom, in quotations, does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic.
Wow.
Where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven, first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness.
Wow.
Yo, that's it, man. I like it because James is very practical, kind of like Jesus' sermons too, aside from the times that he's talking in parable that no one understood. But like the Sermon on the Mount, very practical, right? He's saying, hey, look, if you are harboring in your heart envy, any bitter envy and selfish ambition, right? That Paul talks about in Philippians, right? Don't do anything out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, right? Don't think it's all about you. He says you're acting in an earthly, unspiritual, so like it's not spirit-led or spirit-filled, and a demonic way of living, which is right. We don't really associate that. Usually we just say, oh, he's not. No, it's like this is demonic, because it's not one, there's no middle ground. It's either you're with God or you're with not. And not just that, but it also leads to disorder and every evil practice. So he's pitting here the two sides of wisdom, right? One saying, I'm operating from my own desires of pleasing myself. I don't really care about the others. And the other one from the living a life that's led by the Spirit. That's
right. Right. And that part, there in 14, where he says, don't boast about having bitter envy and being self-seeking and lying. Don't boast about these things. And like we mentioned before, to do that is not to. There's a saying in Spanish, we often utilize when someone is, very straightforward or, just frank. They, no tienen pelo en la lengua. They don't have literally they don't have hair on their tongue, but it means they don't have a filter. They they just speak. Yeah. And for some reason we have added that into a virtue these days, where if someone is straightforward and they say what's in their heart, and they say it how it is, somehow we esteem them higher than others, right? And, we'll even consider them to lead us in in decision making,
right.
And wow, James speaks against that. Like, listen, that is not a virtue. That's not from God. It's demonic. So don't boast about it. And I think we often do that. Like, I said it how it is. I'm gonna go in there and just speak my mind. But in reality, we have to measure our words carefully.
Wow.
And that displays wisdom from above.
That's good.
Yeah, it doesn't. And how Brian mentioned, the power of our words. God speaks and he creates, and what he creates is good. Yet now, because of sin, what we speak can also have, the adverse effect, which is cause chaos. So we certainly have to be careful with what we say and what we do.
That's good. Brian, you got any thoughts here?
I don't know, man. I think that when it comes to speaking your mind and being honest and straightforward, there is some value in that. I believe that it loses its worth if you don't do it tactfully, right? And so, yeah, man, I think, you should speak your mind, but you should also honor the person you're speaking it to. At times we tend to, like Gabriel was saying, we tend to speak exactly what's on our mind without a filter, without any regard for the person we're communicating this to and how it may affect them or how it may affect our relationship with them. And unfortunately, I believe politics has given this a bad rep, but we do have to be diplomatic in the way that we speak to people, because their feelings and what's going on with them is just as valuable as what's going on with me. And I don't know, taking a point from from the Gospels, from Jesus and the way that he did things, even when he would just completely annihilate the Pharisees with his words, he would do so with such loving kindness that he was drawn to tears in many occasions. At least Scripture tells even praying over Jerusalem, he's crying over Jerusalem, and I think that in some way or another, our hearts, and what James is talking about, your heart should be filled with these emotions as you're speaking to people. Just, that's part of being real. It's not just saying, things how they are, but communicating with that emotion, behind your words. That is hey, I'm telling you this, not because I'm high and mighty, or I'm the perfect Sabbath keeper, or I'm righteous or an elder or whatever. but I'm telling you this because I deeply and profoundly care for you, and I love you. You know, and when it comes from there, I think that our whole tone in conversation just changes.
Right.
Sorry. And so, his dog's speaking from the heart too.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where he's coming from. That wisdom isn't something that is just, knowledge that you pick up and experience that you yourself have, but wisdom is also taking into account these emotions, and the real motivation of your heart. Wisdom brings all that into account, and to be wise isn't necessarily to always say the right thing, but it is to say it for the right reason, and that's because you love your brother, you love your sister.
That's good. Yeah, that's powerful. I think of when you were putting that imagery of Jesus responding to the Pharisees, it seems though like the times that he did respond, where we would say more aggressively or whatever, was when he was seeing that people were hurting other people, right? You know what I'm saying? So Pharisees were doing something that was causing hurt or whatever it is, pain to other people. And I think that's when he was acting out, literally turning tables.
He called them snakes, bro.
I mean, yeah. So it's like, it's just, and especially that, I think it goes back to James' point in the first verses, right? Hey, you that have leadership roles or preachers, teachers, whatever it is, like you guys are held at a higher accountable. You are held accountable at a higher rate because of the influence that you have. And I think that's why Jesus was so direct in saying, hey, you guys are literally, what is it? Dead people walking, right? You're literally graves. Yeah. So I think it's powerful here. James taking in the same vein, and just pitting these. There's only two sides of the coin. There's no middle ground where people may think, oh yeah, I'm gonna. You really have to. Your words and your life will show what you believe in. You can't distance that too, right? Marlon says many Christians boast of their wisdom and knowledge of the scriptures, but wisdom comes with love and empathy and putting that into practice. Yeah, very interesting too that James doesn't say that wisdom is knowing all of the Torah or all of the law or all of the teachings, but it's literally it's very practical, right? And I think that's my takeaway for today. How can I be more of that, right? He says all wisdom that comes from heaven is pure, it's peace loving, it's considerate, it's submissive, it's full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Right. So it's a very active relational idea of wisdom. It's not necessarily, I know all the beliefs and principles and doctrines. It's more like, no, are you loving? Are you putting others first?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because on contrast, what James says right before that, describing wisdom that is earthly and sensual and demonic, he says, for wherever envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there.
Wow.
And so that kind of wisdom is just self-seeking. It's only interested in pleasing, you or people like you.
Right.
And whereas, wisdom from God, it's the exact opposite. It's other-centered.
Right.
So yeah, man.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah. I guess we're doing takeaways.
Yeah. We'll jump into big takeaway here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just, I guess the last two verses, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. And I get drawn back, at least my Bible, right? It has like these little verses there in the middle where you kind of like look at stuff, and so it takes you back to Luke. And I love Luke. Luke is my favorite gospel. But anyway, Luke chapter 6. This is Jesus talking about like, loving your enemies. Well, he talks about a bunch of things, but this is one of them: loving your enemies. And he says, "Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked." And then he says, "Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful." Other renditions say, "Perfect, just as your Father is perfect." And so, in the language that we use, are we quick to cut people down because they're doing the wrong thing, or are we merciful? And I think that a tongue and a heart full and ready to speak and act out mercy.
Mm-hmm.
That's best. And I think even Micah says it. What does the Lord your God ask of you but to be merciful?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Obviously, act justly and all the other stuff, but be merciful.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, my big takeaway is there in verse 9. With it, with the tongue, we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the image of God. So yeah, for me, this is a rebuke. Sometimes we, we say for our big takeaway, we, this like really big, promise. But for me, I don't know why this rebuke hits me, because I'm quick as well to, if I feel like someone is disagreeing with me sharply and we're not seeing eye to eye,
cut them down.
Especially on big issues like, human rights and ethics. In my mind, it's just sakata, like just cut them down completely.
Tomala. Yeah.
Yeah, but everyone is created in the image of God, and I imagine that's, of course, Jesus's way of approaching people. When I think of the Last Supper and the moments before Jesus is washing everyone's feet, and Judas, who would just in a few hours betray him and hand him over to the high priests and the temple guards, yet Jesus still washed his feet. So yeah, he still affirmed Judas's humanity and dignity, even while knowing he was going to betray him. So
no, that's beautiful. I love it. Those are great points there. And I think it's the whole idea, and I think it's an appeal to all of us, right? And I think none of us have this right, is to really ask God to help us control the tongue, and to really, as James is saying, right, not just fool yourself in saying, oh, I'm a believer, I give tithe, I go to church, I tune into 3ABN on Saturdays, I watch the service, but to really say faith goes more beyond that, and even more beyond just your praise to God, right? How does that look in your relationship to others? Are you actually doing good to others? Are you showing partiality? Are you doing good deeds? As he always says, right? He's like, even the demons believe and tremble. Like they're more, I guess, in awe and respect than you are. And then now he's saying, the tongue is such a powerful thing that many of us think that we control, but it really controls us. And so really living in that light. So I think it's an appeal to all of us, especially in this time where there's so much chaos going on, and it's so easy to get in debates and frustration because we're so just tired of all that's going on and the political division. So it's a call to all sides, in the spectrum: Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Green Party, white, black, everyone that is in this, to really take into mind that the person you're dialoguing with or even disagreeing with is an image bearer of God's image, is a bearer of God's image, and they are a child of God, even when they don't seem to be acting in that light, right? So, which is tough, but it's an appeal to all of us to still be loving and let our faith be seen and heard by our deeds and our words. So awesome, guys. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Gabe, for coming on. Appreciate you guys. Thank you, Marlon, for talking, and Brenda and everyone else that tuned in. We hope that you have been blessed by this. We've been blessed. We've been challenged too. And we will see you next week as we continue in the book of James. So have a great weekend, guys. We'll see you all later.